I met and married my husband in 5 months. Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Caitlin, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you for listening to my story. Let's talk about them. So, before I tell you about how me and my husband met, I have to tell you about what happened that led me up to meeting my husband. December of 2016, after I turned 18, I decided to move back to Hawaii where my family is originally from. During that time, I ended up moving in with a cousin and I was going through a really bad breakup. I ended up moving away, which led me to March of 2017 where I get a call and I found out that he ended up passing away. I went to Maryland for his funeral and then I came back to Hawaii and I told myself I am not ready to be in a relationship, like at all. At all, at all. The thing about me though is that I really like to prowl on Tinder. I'd be like every 3 months I'd be on my phone like, ooh, let me see if there's anybody that, wants to hang out or whatever. It turned to September, and by September I hadn't really reached out to anybody, so I picked up my phone again and was like, oh, let me get on Tinder. I like swiping through Tinder, like, no, 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 yes. And then I saw that I got a super like, and I was like, oh my gosh, if somebody's willing to spend money on me, I'm gonna give them the time of day. And so I liked him back, and at that point we started having a conversation. September of that year, September 17th, I want to say, my mom ended up flying out to Hawaii to go see me. I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm hanging out with my family. My mom takes me to the other island so I can see my aunts. I'm hanging out, I'm having a good time, I'm drinking with my cousins, everything's nice. Whole time that we were out there, I was texting my husband, my now husband. I fly with my mom to the outer island. I fly back to the island I was staying on. It was finally time for her to go. So we're hanging out that entire day. We ended up going shopping and we ended up going to Long's. Whole time I'm texting my now husband and I'm like, hey, what you doing? My mom is sitting there. We're getting ready to take her to the airport at this point. She had kind of noticed, like low key, I was texting somebody the whole day. And so she was kind of side eyeing me. She was taking extra long to get to the airport too. Like her flight was at 11 o'clock. We got to the airport at like 10. I was like, Ma, you don't want to get to the airport at like 9 o'clock? You gotta, you're going back to the mainland. You're flying overseas. Like, why are you doing that? So finally, I texted my boyfriend and I was like, hey, what are you doing tonight? I don't really want to be alone today. Like, it's going to be kind of a lot. My family's going out of town. He was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. I can come, we can hang out. And I was like, oh, that'd be nice. Like, totally not thinking that, we were going to get in a relationship. I was totally like, oh, I'm going to get into relations. I told him, hey, meet me at Alamoana. We'll meet, we can talk, yada, yada, so on and so forth. And he's like, oh, yeah, cool. Well, I texted that at like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. My mom is still hanging out. She's like, I gotta go to Long's. I gotta go to CVS. I gotta go do this. I'm like, girl, you are leaving Island today. What are you doing? Why are you, trying to dip out of town like this? Trying to take your sweet dandy time. Like the plane's not gonna leave you. And finally, she kind of caught on that I was like trying to push her to the airport. Like, come on, girl, let's go. Come on, you got a flight to catch. So we're sitting at the airport. It's 10 o'clock. I'm texting my boyfriend. I'm like, hey, do you think that you can pick me up from the airport? Because there was no way. I told him, meet me at Ala Moana at 10 or 11 o'clock. He was like, cool with that. And mind you, again, this is 10, 11 o'clock at night. Like, crazy people meet up people at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Crazy people who are trying to have relations meet people at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. 18-year-old brain me was like, oh yeah, completely normal. That, and I worked the night shift. So I was used to demon time, okay? I was always on demon time. I texted him and I was like, hey, do you think that you can pick me up from the airport instead? I'm trying to drop off my mom. He's like, yeah, of course. He ends up going to the airport, picking me up. He's at the airport. Now, I finally get my mom to the airport, trying to get her on a plane. I finally get the dude to the airport, trying to meet up with him. He's sitting there waiting for like a whole 20, 30 minutes at this point. And I'm like, damn, like, I feel really bad because I didn't, intend for him to wait that long. Finally, she goes to the security line. I'm like, okay, bye, Mom. And she looks at me and she stops and she's like, are you meeting somebody today? You have a boyfriend? And I was like, girl, be for real. I don't have a boyfriend. And I told her, I was like, I'm never getting married. I am never having children. I'm never getting married. You are never going to be a grandmother. I'm going to be single and on demon time for the rest of my life. And she's like, okay, whatever you say. And so I'm like, okay, goodbye, Mom. I get her to the airport, get her on her plane, she's gone. I'm sitting there for a bit and I'm like, damn, like that was, that was mad awkward. I'm walking out of the airport now trying to find this dude. I'm like, hey, what kind of car are you in? And he's like, I am in a gray Nissan. And so I'm like, okay. I go up to the departures. He's sitting up at departures. I'm like, trying to find his car. I'm looking around for a gray Nissan, right? I'm hunting down for this bitch, right? I'm going left, right, left, right. I don't see a single gray Nissan in the area, right? 20 minutes goes by. He's texting me the whole time like, I'm in a gray Nissan. I'm very at the very front. I see a Nissan. It's not gray. I'm like, I'm not gonna walk up to some stranger's car and attempt to get in. That's how you get kidnapped. Even though the rest of the story should have got me kidnapped, that was the point. I was like, I'm gonna get kidnapped. After 20 minutes, he's like, let me get out and find you. I'm like, thank God you decided to find me. He comes out of the car and I see him and I'm like, hi. And he's like, gray Nissan. And I'm like, that bitch is purple. That's a purple Nissan. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm colorblind. Wow, you stood on a mighty fine hill for somebody who's colorblind trying to tell me what colors are which. Even though that was red flag number one, I still ended up getting in his car and he started driving down. We ended up, instead of going to Ala Moana, because Ala Moana, if you don't know, closes at 11 o'clock at night, and I think at the time it was closing at 10. We ended up going to Duke Beach, which is right down the road. He was like, I watch planes take off from here. And so I was like, okay, cool. And we ended up watching my mom's plane go away. And, he was pretty sweet. We ended up listening to a lot of Ed Sheeran songs. Like, it was kind of nice to sit there and have our little time together. He was really sweet, too. And I was like, oh, like, anybody who's willing to pick me up from the airport after I let my mom go. And he even watched me cry. Like, honestly, I got a little teary-eyed because we're hanging out. And finally, he's like, hey, do you want to go to this other spot that I know? And I'm like, oh my God, he's taking me to a second location. He's going to kill me off. This is how I die. If letting some strange man I've never met before pick me up from the airport who wouldn't tell me his job occupation was not enough, this is it. Second location. They always tell you on those serial killer documents, if they take you to a second location, you're dead, right? But I was like, yeah, let's go. So I get in his car, we go, we keep, we're driving, we go out beyond Hawaii Kai to a little area where there's like a little viewing area, a little viewing dock that you can kind of see all the stars at. We're like, wow, that's awesome. Like I saw it, I was like, man, look at the stars, like look at the moon. It's so beautiful. The thing about Hawaii is that it's got probably clearest skies to see, stars at night. And so I thought that was really cool. We're sitting there and we're looking at the stars and I'm sitting in his car like, wow, this dude is really cool. He took me to go see stars and stuff. And so after that, we hung out for a little bit longer and then he ended up taking me home. And we had like a really sweet first date. After he left and he took me home, we ended up looking at each other and we were like, okay, so I'll see you tomorrow though, right? And I was like, yeah. I had been out of work for a couple of days before that because I had left to go to the Big Island, right? And I had taken the rest of the time off so that I could see my mom. My first day back of work is the first day after our first date, right? And I go back into work and I have a little hickey on my neck and my coworkers are like, oh my God, the mosquitoes on the Big Island are so big, aren't they? And I was like, yeah. Like, obviously trying not to tell them that I had gone on a date and I was seeing a guy, like, especially because we had just met the night before. My friend, because he was also my manager, comes up to me and he's like, oh, it looks like you had a fun little trip. And I'm like, oh yeah, it was cool. So I was trying to hide him for a bit. I didn't want anybody to know that I had a boyfriend because I was not ready for people to know that I was seeing somebody. Mind you, we weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. We were just seeing each other. At this point, my manager was like, oh, are you guys getting serious? And I was like, I don't know. I think I'm going to break up with him. Like, this is too serious for me. I'm just trying to have fun. The freezer and was like, you are absolutely not allowed to break up with him. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, first off, it's cold. I don't want to be in no freezer. I'm like, bro, let me out of here. He was like, nope. I need you to tell me that you're not gonna break up with him before I let you out of here. I'm like, okay, crazy. Yeah, sure, okay, I'm not gonna break up with him. And he was like, yeah, he's a really good guy. Like, I understand why you want to break up with him because he's really, really good. And it's hard, when you're used to not being in great relationships. It's hard to be with somebody of his caliber. Like, my husband is smart, he's funny, he's really kind, like, he's all the things that you would want in a man. But at that point in time, I wasn't used to being in a healthy relationship. I was just kind of like doing me, and I was definitely on demon time. I had a hot girl summer. That was my first and pretty much my only hot girl summer because I wilded out that summer. I did so many things. I broke my kneecaps. I'm gonna have to tell y'all about that. Completely different story time, right? After 45 minutes to listen to him to tell me not to break up with him, I was like, all right, I'm not gonna break up with him. We're good. We're not gonna do that. And so we ended up getting together. We stayed together, obviously. October goes by. He asked me to be his girlfriend, gives me a tip and toe necklace. It was very sweet. November goes by. We're in a relationship at this point. We're going like solid. Like we had been together. We were, making things shake, things shimmy. November 5th, we're buying cars together. I'm already looking at him. We've already said I love you at this point. I'm starting to talk to him about children. I'm like, I want kids. I really want kids. In my head, we were already married. Honestly, A, if you were willing to buy me a car, we were married. B, we were already like combining our finances. He was helping me get in with the bank that he banked at. I was like, damn, bro, we were really together. We were together, right? November 5th, we were buying cars. November 23rd, we were already looking at rings, right? And so I'm sitting there with him at the jewelry store. I'm like, oh my God, this is getting so serious so quick. Like, I'm sitting there in my head like, damn, bro, this is kind of crazy. I've never fallen head over heels for somebody like that. You know what I mean? Oohing and awing at the rings. He's taking down notes about what I'm telling him I want in a ring. He finds a ring while I'm there, and I'm like, oh my God, like, we leave the jewelry store together because I didn't want to know if he was buying a ring, right? But I told him after we walk out of the jewelry store, I'm like, I have a minimum of 1 year. We have to be dating for 1 year, at least 1 year before we get married, right? Because I wanted to be sensible in my head. And I was like, well, we've only known each other for 3 months. You could still be a serial killer if that's what you were into. You know what I mean? We were hanging out for a little bit. And at that point, I started to feel kind of weird. Like, not against him, just like my body started feeling weird. And so I'm sitting there and like things were really uncomfortable. And like I noticed I was sleeping more. I had to go to the bathroom more. And like, things were starting to get weird. And I was like, damn, that's kind of funny. But I didn't really think anything of it because I was me. I started falling asleep places. That's what got me. I would go to work and I'd fall asleep while cutting vegetables and stuff. And that should have been warning sign number one. That and I would crave foods like hardcore. So obviously, after that, we found out that I was pregnant. It was December 5th that I had my last hurrah. Mind you, again, I moved to Hawaii December 5th of 2016. December 5th of 2017, I'm hanging out with my boys and we're at our little employee event. We're playing volleyball, we're hanging out, things are chill, it's lit. And one of my best friend's cousins walks up to me and she's like, so I heard that you're in a relationship and you're getting married and you're going to have a baby soon. And I was like, girl, like, I am not doing any of that. Like, totally not wanting my friends to know I was already thinking about marrying this dude. But I was like, we're kind of talking about getting married, but we're not, like, too serious yet. She's like, okay, yeah, like, whatever you say. And I'm like, girl, like, I'm not ready for a relationship. I'm not ready to get married yet. I'm still living my life. But that night, I had already planned on going out with the boys. They were going to go back to our apartment, me and my cousin's apartment. And we were going to, drink, hang out, whatever. We go out to get yakiniku at like 7, 8 o'clock at night, right? And we're sitting down and we're eating. It's lit. We're about to go drinking. And my cousin looks at me. She's like, Caitlin, it's 8 o'clock. Like, I'm sitting there eating. I'm just like falling asleep. And my cousin looks at me and she's like, Caitlin, it is 8 o'clock. Why are you falling asleep? And I was like, I don't know. I'm really tired. I had a long day. Like, in my head, just thinking I'm just tired, And she looks at me and she's like, you need to go get a pregnancy test. And I was like, a pregnancy test? I am not pregnant. Like, in firm denial that I was obviously pregnant. I'm not pregnant, not at all. And so I'm sitting there like, okay, whatever, like I'll go get a pregnancy test, but I'm telling you, I'm not pregnant. I go into the bathroom at work before my shift and I take the pregnancy test, right? And I looked at it and I saw that I only had one line and I put it back in my bag. And I was like, okay, I'm not pregnant. And I go back into work. And so I'm doing my whole shift. I get through 6 hours of cooking. I'm sitting there chopping. I'm hanging with my girl. Me and my girl were working the station. I was like, oh my God, like just chilling with her. We had plans to go out that night. We were going to go on a double date with our boyfriends. And I was like, oh, okay, like, having my little fun time, right? My girlfriend and I were hanging out. And then all of a sudden, like at the very end of my shift, it's like 6:30. So I'm getting my hummus together. I'm sitting there in my head. I'm like, wait. Yeah, there was only one line on that test, but C is for control and T is for test. Did only the test line show up? Oh my God, am I pregnant? I grab my bag. I run over to the bathrooms at my job and I'm looking at the pregnancy test and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm pregnant. And sure enough, it was just the test line. It wasn't the control in the test. It was just the test. And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm pregnant. Go back to my friend. I'm like, ha 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 ha. Like I'm, cutting vegetables and I'm turning white and I'm like freaking out. And my girl looks at me and she's like, why do you look like that? Like you look like you've just seen a ghost. And I turn towards her and I'm like, I think I'm pregnant. And she looks at me and we look at each other and we just start laughing. And she looks at me and she's like, ha 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 ha. Oh shit. And I was like, yeah. Oh my God, what are we going to do? And she's like, okay, let's, you haven't told him. Let's wait until tonight. We'll go tell him. And I'm like, okay, all right. Like, kind of freaking out because, oh my God, I just met this dude 3 months ago. And all of a sudden I'm pregnant with his child. Like, that's insane. We ended up going out to dinner that night. She helped me finish my shift. We go out to dinner that night. Her boyfriend picks us up. She's telling her boyfriend what's going on. He's like, wow, that's crazy. And I was like, yeah, that's really crazy. And so we meet Tyler at the restaurant that we're eating dinner at that night. And I look at him and I'm like, how do I tell this dude that I'm pregnant? And I look at him and I'm like, so I might be pregnant. And he was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, totally chill about it. Like, he had heard this before, which he had not. He looked at me really, really chill and he was like, okay, yeah. And I was like, okay, glad that you're chill about this. And so we said goodbye to our friends and then we drove home. And on the way home, we ended up picking up another pregnancy test, right? By that point, my kind of shock had worn off a little bit. And I was just like, man, maybe I'm not pregnant. Like it is what it is, right? We get back to his house and I'm just kind of sitting there for like a whole hour. I was like, I don't want to take this pregnancy test. Like, mind you, everybody else in his house is asleep. I'm just sitting there awake with him, like, I don't want to take this test. I was like, oh my God, I just turned 19. Like, I'm going to be a teen mom, technically. This is kind of crazy, I ended up, finally he was like, just do it. And so I took the test. Turns out that I was pregnant. Kind of freaked out a little bit, but we were like, okay, it's going to be okay. We sat there together. I ended up calling out of work the next day. I told his mom. I told my mom. It was like kind of a whole thing, right? That was December. We go into January. I did not know that he had gone out and bought a ring. Like, when I found out that I was pregnant, I looked at him in his eyes and I was like, well, now that I'm pregnant, you're going to have to marry me. And he was like, yeah, I already planned on doing that, right? And so I guess sometime at that point, he had decided to go out and get a ring. So everything's good. We're at the end of January. The ring ends up coming in on like February 4th. And so I'm sitting there with him. He's like, I gotta go pick up something from the mall. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Okay. So we go down to the mall. He goes inside. He ends up picking up the ring. He puts it in his pocket. And I was like, I just had a feeling. I was like, are we about to get engaged? Like, we were walking around Bed Bath & Beyond back when that was still a store. We're walking around Bed Bath & Beyond and I'm like kind of freaking out because I'm like, I think he just picked up a ring. And he's like, I want to take you to the airport. And so we go down to the airport and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I feel like he's about to propose. Now, mind you, I had a week off of work scheduled for the week after, right? And so he takes me to the airport and he parks the car at the same spot that we first met. And I was like, at that point, I knew he was going to propose to me. I was like, oh my God. And he was like, come, I want to show you something. And he takes me around to the trunk and he asked me, to marry him. And I was like, oh my God, like, yes, I'll marry you. Like, it was such a sweet sentiment. The security guard was watching from down the block and he was like, yeah, you, that's how. And I was like, oh my God. Like, absolutely freaking out because I was like, oh my God, like, this is kind of crazy. Here I went from, single me, partying, party rocking, wilding out to, oh my God, look at me, like, getting married and pregnant and getting married. And so he asked me to be his wife, and I said yes. And we spent the rest of the day kind of hanging out. I'm getting all emotional because I'm like, oh my God, like I'm a fiance now. I text my mom, and she's like, oh my God, congrats. And, it was really cool. Sometime in February, my job put me on a new station, and I was sitting there working, and I was like, things were not working great. I was like, oh my God, like, I'm not feeling my best. Like, I think that I need to stop working. I started getting worried about insurance. And my husband looks at me and he's like, hey, if you want to, we can just get married next weekend. And I was like, oh my God, that's kind of crazy. Like, you want to get married now? We're in the middle of February. We literally got engaged February 4th to the 5th. And we were talking about getting married on like February 24th. And we literally had a week. We were planning our wedding in a week. And I was like, okay, yeah. So we go online, we get the court documents, we get our friend to officiate the wedding. We filled out the documents. We had decided we were going to get married that Saturday. We were going to go to the beach that we basically spent all of our time, like our dating time at. I ended up getting a dress. I called my mom on the Thursday before we get married. And I'm like, hey mom, I just want to tell you that I'm getting married this weekend. And my mom starts freaking out. She's like, what are you married? You're getting married this weekend, you crazy girl. Like, I'm looking at flights right now. I'm going to fly out for your wedding, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, mom, you don't have to fly out. Like, we're just getting married. And so she's like, okay, like, I tell my dad I'm getting married. He's like, oh my God, I'm so happy for you. And it was like really cute. And so the night before, I tell Tyler, I'm like, hey, did you tell your family we're getting married? Mind you, we live at his family's house. He's like, oh yeah, I kind of like mentioned it to them. And I was like, okay, cool. And so the next morning, I'm getting my hair done. He's getting his suit. We're getting together. He's getting his suit together. I'm like, okay, chill. And we're just kind of sitting there and we're getting ready for us to get married. I go get my hair cut, my hair done. I'm putting on my makeup in the hair salon. And we met our friend at the beach, and his family showed up because at the very last moment he told his sister, hey, we're gonna get married. And she was like, oh my God. And so she got herself together and mom and dad together, and they ended up showing up at the beach. And it was a really beautiful ceremony, honestly. Even for as last minute it was planned, it was just kind of between us, and it was really intimate, and we really enjoyed it. And so we sat there and we got married that day. February 24th of 2018, we ended up getting married. July of that year, we ended up having our son. He was born healthy. Things were good. And fast forward down the line, we've been married now for 5 going on 6 years. Very happily together. Our son is now 5 years old. We have bought not only one house, but 2 houses in that time. We have moved states. We're no longer in Hawaii, but we've moved states. Hopefully we'll get back to being in Hawaii because I am not a mainland girly, but it's okay. Yeah, and things are still good. I just wanted to tell you guys because I think it was such a crazy event, story of events to lead up to what is a wonderful and beautiful marriage. I love my husband so very much. He's an amazing guy. Like, he does all my audio and visual stuff. He supports me and he cares for me. And it's kind of crazy that somebody I met on Tinder ended up being my lifelong partner. Just an absolute all-around wonderful guy. Like, honestly, I could not have imagined a better husband. I had my Tinder radius set to 5 miles. So at some point he was in town and he saw my profile and he liked me and I liked him back. And it's kind of crazy how, like, a small chain of events. If I had never gotten on Tinder that day, I would have never met my husband. And I feel incredibly lucky to have him because he is such a wonderful guy. And it's just kind of crazy that one Tinder super like led to the amazing life that I have now. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you guys for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I will put a link to my socials down at the bottom if you'd like to follow me on Instagram or if you'd like to follow me on TikTok. But aside from that, I hope to see you guys soon. Bye!